spring once said to the nightingale, I mean to give you birds a ball. Pray, Mom, ask the birdies all, the birds and the birdies great and small. Tra-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la-la-la-la. Tra-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la-la. Oh, the cuckoo and wren, they danced for life. The raven waltzed with the yellowbird's wife. The awkward owl and the bashful jay wished each other a very good day. Tra-la-la-la, 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 la-la-la. Tra-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la-la. Oh, the woodpecker came from his hole in a tree, and he brought his bill to the company. For cherries ripe and berries red, 'twas a very long bill, so the birdies said. Tra-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la-la-la-la. Tra-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la-la. Oh, they danced all day till the sun was low, and the mother birds prepared to go. Then one and all, both great and small, flew to the nest from the birdie's ball. Tra-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la-la-la-la. Tra-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la-la. So I was not, well, I was only just past 3. And there was a general store there. And these people were very good friends of Dad and Mother. And this man just thought I was the stuff. And every time we'd go to the store, he'd say, well, they called me Edie. Edie, if you'll kiss me, I'll give you a cookie. Well, I would kiss him. So he'd take me over to the cookie case and let me pick out the kind of cookie I wanted. And one day he thought he'd be real nice to me, and he gave me a cookie with currants on it, a new one. And they said, I kind of looked at it and backed up, and I said, I don't eat flies. And he just thought that was the cutest thing he ever heard. He just told everybody. Well, this woman, they got in a shipment of dolls, and any number of them were broken in various ways, you know. So she told, this woman told Grammy that if she'd take them home and fix them, she'd give her part of them. Well, they were the kind, you know, china heads that the head set down on the body, you know. Well, some of them were just broken around the edge of those things, and she took stuff like bandage cloth and bound them back and forth like you were bandaging them up, you know, and then sewed them, fixed that. And I think some of them maybe had the hands broken. Of course, they had china hands. And she fixed up several, and I played with them while she was fixing them. And Grammy cautioned me. She said, now, these belong to Mrs. Menifee, and you can play with them. But then they have to go home to her. We're just having them for a little while, and then she's going to take them home with her. And so I knew it all the time, and I felt badly when they packed them up and took them over to the store. And they had a community Christmas tree in the schoolhouse. And I can remember, as well as anything, a great big Christmas tree. And this schoolhouse was crowded. And my dad stood up and held me on his shoulder so I could see. And they brought some dolls out. I don't know how many, but anyhow, this one, and called my name. And they said when they called my name, I just looked around so bewildered. And I looked up and I said, oh, Jemima Jane. That was this doll's name, Jemima Jane. Well, I can remember how they laughed. Of course, I didn't know what they were laughing at. I was so thrilled to see that doll and to get her. And she was bisque, I guess you'd say. And really, she was pretty. I can remember just how she looked. She had a pink tam o' shanter, and it was all molded, you know, the tam o' shanter. This pink tam o' shanter with a little knot on top, a little rosette on top. And, of course, Mother dressed them. I don't remember anything about the dress, only that she had a broken shoulder here or something, and it was all bandaged back and forth underneath to hold her head on. Of course, they sewed through. They had holes in the corners of them, most of them, and they sewed right through those to the body. But they said, it brought down the house when I said, "Oh, Jemima Jane."
Everyone had a name.
I named every one of them. Jemima Jane and Susan, and most of them had double names. Tersey Ann. I was just like you kids. I just picked names out of the air. I was like, what was Shannon Carindale or Carindale's doll? This is awful name.
Betty Boop or something of that.
Yeah, I can't think what it was now. Well, that's the way my dolls, they only, of course, most of them had like Jemima Jane and some names that I'd heard someplace. Then, the next Christmas I can remember, that must have been 2 Christmases later, we had come back to Kansas, and this was at Sapulpa, this first Christmas. Then we came back to Kansas, and Sadie and Claude and Uncle George and Aunt Mat had come from Michigan, and that was the first Christmas. They hadn't been there very long, and Sadie, of course, Sadie and Claude had just been married a few months, and of course he had had an operation for tuberculosis of the intestines, and they didn't think he would live too long, maybe, and they took out, I think it was 9 feet of his intestines. Anyhow, it was a terrific amount that were tubercular, and they took it out and sewed him up again and sent him out to Kansas to recuperate because they thought the air was better out there and everything. And he came out of it and lived to be 89 years old. And Sadie she was an adopted child and had been raised by, the people who raised her were her uncle and aunt, her father's brother and his wife, and they were wealthy. And Grammy lived right in the community, and she said she always remembered Sadie had a little bit of this rocking chair. Louise had it, and the kids all had it, a little red rocking chair, just a little tiny one. And they said she walked in to this home with her chair in her hand, and she says, "I come to tay," and she set it down, and she tayed too. And so they came out pretty soon now, when Mama gets through, they came out from Michigan, and of course they had always had Christmas trees there. Well, in Kansas, we didn't have such a thing as cedar trees, you know, unless somebody planted them in their yard. So Sadie and Claude went out in the orchard and found a dead peach tree and brought it in and set it up in Grandmother's parlor. And for some reason, Sadie had brought decorations from Michigan, and she had strings of Christmas tree lights, which were little metal, I guess they were tin. There'd be 2 little things about, I can't even make it that small, a little bigger than that, around, and they'd clamp together, and on one side of it was a holder for a candle, and then these 2 little things that clamped onto the limb to hold them. And she brought candles. Of course, the candles didn't look like the ones we had now. They were about this long and twisted.
Yeah.
And so she she and Claude wrapped the limbs of that tree with cotton batting that Grandmother had for quilts. They take strips of that and wrap the limbs. And then they put these candles, and we had popcorn and cranberries strung all over the tree. And Sadie had, I was 4. No, I was 6. Must have been pretty. No, I was just past 5. And Eva was a baby, about a year old. And this doll under the Christmas tree with, I don't know whether it had hair or not. Probably not. I can't remember that. But all dressed up. And of course, I thought it was for me. I just never dreamed I was the only little girl in the bunch, and I just never thought. Well, when they went to hand out the presents, that was Eva's doll. And I got a pair of red crocheted bedroom slippers with cotton soles. The sole, I don't suppose you ever saw any. They were leather, I guess, the bottoms of them. And then inside, it was like sheep's wool. Mm-hmm. The sole was like that. Well, they had crocheted these, and then they sew them onto the sole, whip them onto the sole. Well, I liked them, but I wanted that doll so bad, and I still can just feel that hurt when it wasn't mine.
Yeah, it's like Mother tells about her, the coat she thought
she found under the bed
and thought was hers.
Yes, sir. Now that isn't all. Of course, I always told her that if she hadn't been snooping, she wouldn't have known anything about it.
Yeah.
But kids have to snoop just for, and she was old enough to know better, but she did.
Photographer that was such a good friend of Lynn's, and that
Neb. He taught Neb.
Neb. All right. And Lynn picked the name Howard, and Neb picked the name Cable after his friend. Then Paul Townsend Cook.
That was my grandmother Cook's maiden name, Townsend.
Your grandmother Cook. Now, this is something we didn't get on the tape, Mama D, that I wanted to go into.
Okay.
Your father's name was George Edwin Cook.
Yeah.
His father's name was George, no middle initial, Cook.
George Cook.
And your grandfather was the one that didn't like the use of the E, but your father later picked that E up again.
His brothers did, or you could say my father did.
All right, that's something we didn't clarify. How many brothers did your father have?
He had 3 brothers.
All right, what were their names?
Carmi.
My, where'd you get that?
Carmi. That's a Bible name, Bob.
All right.
I don't know where, but it is. And Charles and...
That's the Uncle Charlie you mentioned.
Egbert. Egbert. Only he was always called Bert.
Well, now, that's not the same Elbert that then witnessed your father's marriage.
No, we don't have that in there.
All right. Now, who was the Elbert Cook that witnessed this marriage certificate?
Well, he was a cousin. He was a cousin of my father.
I see.
His father and my grandfather were brothers.
All right. Now, this was all in Michigan, where they were born and raised. And your grandfather left Michigan and came to McPherson County, Kansas.
And then to Kiowa County, Kansas.
All right. Then your father followed along behind?
Yeah.
With the shipment of the family stock?
Yeah.
The livestock?
He came to McPherson County, too, and then they came on down there. And Lynn was born in McPherson County.
All right. Now, we don't have recorded the information you were giving about the fact that both your father and your grandfather came to Kiowa County, Kansas, and each took up a homestead and started proving up 160 acres there. And then that was about the time of the opening of the Cherokee Strip.
Yeah.
And your father came to...
1864, I believe they came to, it tells here someplace. They came to Kansas in 1864, I think.
That would have been at the end of the Civil War then.
Well, yeah, that's about
Just
right.
after great-grandfather was mustered out, he was a captain.
Well, now your father would have only been 2 years old in
Well,
1864.
Well, then, when were they married?
They were married in
1880.
83.
83. Well, it was 1884 then that they came to McPherson County.
All right. Then,
You got that now?
now had your grandfather been in the Civil War?
Oh, yes, my grandfather was a captain in the Civil War.
What regiment, do you know?
Michigan something, I can't tell you what.
Michigan Volunteers?
June's got
commission?
his commission.
All right. Do you know whether or not, now, what were his brothers' names? Your grandfather's brothers?
My grandfather's brothers. Dolphus and well, he had 5 or 6 brothers.
They were all lived in Michigan?
All lived in Michigan.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, your father married Fanny Oretta Clark. You were going to tell me her parents' names?
Oh, Louisa and Aaron.
Clark.
Aaron Bingham. Now, I think they called him Bingham. Aaron Bingham. Bingham. Clark.
Uh-huh.
ABC.
Do you recall any of their predecessors?
No.
Who invented the Ferris wheel?
Well, that's what I told him a minute ago. That's grandmother Cook's nephew.
That would be your grandfather George Cook's wife.
Mm-hmm.
Niece's
Nephew.
husband. Her niece's husband. Her sister's daughter's husband.
No. Her sister's son. She married a Ferris.
All right, I see.
I don't know what her name was.
Your grandmother Cook's sister married a Ferris.
Yeah.
And their son
Mm-hmm.
is the man that invented the Ferris wheel. All right, we've got it
Now, I
straight
hope
up.
I'm straight of that. I think I am.
Now, you said something about when your father came to Cherokee Strip for the run and settled, something happened to his claim. Now, what was that?
It was school land.
In the
You know how
town
they
side
do-
of what?
Alene.
Alene, Oklahoma.
Uh-huh.
So when they drew the lots, he
Yeah.
wound up without a proper claim.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, now what were they going to do? They're going to draw lots for some other city lots, or was he just out of
No,
luck?
I don't think so. I don't know how they did that. What do you want, darling? Tell you another little side there. Oh, my grandfather, you'll have to get your map. I can't tell you how far. My grandfather walked from McPherson County to Kiowa County and drove a sheep. Walked down there with him.
And drove the sheep.
Drove the
on,
sheep.
On foot.
On foot. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Tough old man.
I don't remember how they have told me how many days it took him.
Now we didn't get recorded the travels of your father before he came back, and after he gave up his claim in the Strip, he then went back and proved up his claim in Kiowa County.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And then after proving up that claim, he moved to Indian Territory,
Uh-huh.
Sapulpa, where he was a deputy United States
Well,
Marshal.
first he went down there, and they logged. There were about 3 families went down together in covered wagons.
And how old were you at this time?
Well, I was not quite 2.
All right.
And Bob, I remember lots of things that happened on that trip down there.
I was just wondering.
I do, and they think it's unusual, but I remember so well. We crossed the Cimarron River, and there were the most beautiful water lilies out in the river. And my dad took off his shoes and walked out on the wagon tongue and reached down and got a couple of those lilies, and we put them in the water bucket. And I can remember that just as plain as day.
Then you were in Indian Territory for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall any of the events
Oh,
there?
yes. Now, that's some of the things, that's some of my first Christmases that we'll have to record later.
All right. Now, he then moved back to Haviland, and farmed, and then later moved into Haviland, into town, and took up the hotel.
Hotel and livery stable.
All right. I wanted to cover the children now of your brothers and sisters.
Okay.
Now
Now we want to
Lynn,
record that?
yes, Lynn had 2 children.
2 children.
And their names?
Howard.
Who lives here in Ponca City.
And Maureen Wrinkle, who lives in Denver.
And her husband's name, first name?
Paul Wrinkle.
And how does he spell that?
Rinkle.
And she was an adopted child.
She,
She is still living.
Yes.
And how many children does she have, if you know?
They have 1 daughter.
You know what her name is?
Her name is Shirley Kendall.
And where does she live?
She lives in, well, like,
Arvada,
Denver. Well, it's Denver. It's Denver suburb.
What's her husband's name, do you know?
Joe
Joe
Wrinkle.
Kendall.
Joe Kendall.
All right.
And he works, well, he has a business of his own, and then he's just what June does.
Oh, works for
data
me?
processing,
Oh,
Data processing.
all right.
computer.
Now then, Neb,
He has 1 son.
and what's his name?
His name is Ford.
And he lives in California?
In California. And he has no children. He is a
Widower?
he's not a pilot. He's an
Aeronautical engineer.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
And what, all right. Then Eva and her husband Edward, they had no children.
Had no
She was
children.
carrying a child when she died. And then Paul and Hazel,
They have 4 children.
4 children. And they live in Louisiana.
Yeah.
Where in Louisiana?
Part of them, well, they live in Houma.
And who does
One of them,
who does he work for?
Paul, is retired.
All right.
He worked for machine company as machine company.
Well, they,
Tell me about that buggy now.
I bought this buggy in Pratt. I can't remember who, but it had a sort of a. It was natural fiber. Wicker, natural color, and it had a funny lining that was ragged. And I bought a pale pink background with the kind of a palm or ferny looking stuff in it. I don't know whether you can see it or not.
silk or velvet or?
No, it was cotton.
Oh, a cotton.
A cotton.
Sateen or something?
No, more like cretonne.
Oh.
The buggy I bought for June when she was about 6 months old. I bought it second hand. It is a natural, it was, I guess, a natural wicker, and it was lined with a kind of a icky looking lining. And so I bought some cretonne that was pink, pale pink, with a kind of a ferny pattern in it. And I lined it. And she was 6 months old when this was taken, and I think about the time, no, she was a year old and she had the whooping cough. But she was sick when that picture was taken, and we couldn't get her to smile. That was a sickly smile. Now this one, we've still got the thing on. I think I want to send it. Okay. Well, I assume that Grammy was about 18 years old when that was taken. I expect this was taken about the time they were married. This dress, I don't know anything about. Of course, Grammy had naturally curly hair, and she wore it in curls a lot of the time in her younger days. Now this picture of me, I don't know why it would have been taken at Cushing, but this is the thing that looks like to me. But I was about 2 years old, and I would say about the time we went to the Indian Territory. This was the Sweetbriar shop. Are you going to turn that on?
Oh, it's been on the whole time?
This was the Sweetbriar shop just after I took it over. That's me in the foreground, and Edna Daniels, and Letha Warren. And I have to look up to see what date it was. The instigation for this picture, Don Raymond was going to military academy to escape the draft, was why he went. And so we had a family dinner over at Cullison, where grandfather and grandmother were living on this farm. And it was, this was in August, before your mother was born in June of the next year. And then, and Ed Barkhurst had been called into service. And he was to go into service. And Aunt Mert and Martha were here from California. And
That was World War One.
yeah, that was World War One. Mm-hmm. And I don't know anything else to tell about it. This is Doris June, aged 5 years, and this was a pink crepe de chine dress, hem-stitched in black. And she hated it with a passion, and that isn't the one we gave to Laverna, though, is it?
And that, I did not want to wear the dress to have that picture made, and she made me. And I've always hated the picture because I hated the dress.
This picture of me eating watermelon was taken in our backyard behind the hotel. These were grapevines up over a trellis, and the walk went back to a little house back here over this side.
What kind of a little house?
A little outhouse. The ladies' aid at Greensburg were making these, we called them bungalow aprons. I guess this was bungalow apron, to sell. And Grammy had a couple made for me, and this one was red. And it had just come. And I got home from school and I put it on, and Cable was out here. Cable and Eva had been out on this walk eating watermelon. And that's all there was left. I didn't get any. But this fellow who took these pictures had kind of a crush on me. He came there from KU, a big old, well, he was a nice fellow and well educated, going to KU. But he came out there and he wore clothes like he was out drilling a well. Only we hadn't started drilling wells in those days. He wore high lace boots and khaki looking clothes, you know. Very, not untidy looking, but not neat looking. His name was Louis Wilhelm. The family was definitely German, but Louis wasn't. But he had kind of a crush on me, and he took pictures. He was putting himself through school taking pictures, and he had some good equipment. So he took this picture of me and the kids out there. You know, I've got that one in there of Cable and Eva. And then he took another one in front of the oven. You remember that one?
I've got it.
Well, now that one was not colored, but this one was colored. these leaves were all green and my apron was red when